Hello everyone, it's Mike Gladwell on Thursday, August 29th, 2019, around 8:30 a.m. And I'm on my way into work to the Emerald City, following one of the more beaten up parts of the Yellow Brick Road. So for anyone who really hasn't read The Wizard of Oz and the 13 books written by the original author and some number more by follow-on writers, I do highly recommend it. Oftentimes you'll hear all books past the first dismissed, and even the first book dismissed because the movie was just so good. But there are continuous lessons. He's one of these guys, L. Frank Baum, who channels emotional intelligence, a lot of programming stuff, application program interface stuff. A lot of concepts are in the Wizard of Oz books, and I'm reading them. I read them to my kid. I got through most of the 13 books. There's a few that I missed with her that I'd like to catch up on, but I'm also reading them with my wife, Natalie, and we just finished The Patchwork Girl of Oz, which is a spectacular book, kind of special to her, I believe, in the way that the Shaggy Man of Oz is special to me. And we're just starting Tick-Tock of Oz, and there's even whole characters like those three that aren't even covered in the movie, but are such great parts of the Wizard of Oz mythology and provide so much to learn. And so I'm in the way, whenever I go to work, these things really pervade my mind. Where I happen to live right now is very much like on this side of the body of water, separating part of one of the two yellow brick roads from Oz. You have to cross a body of water to get there. And I pass all this crazy stuff, like this boat repair pier on the way in, where a lot of people park around here on the way to the ferry, because parking here is free, and even people visiting New York City. It's a little kept secret. You drive into Staten Island, you park near the ferry, and then you just take the ferry over, and then you're in the downtown financial district, and free parking and a great experience like the one I'm having right now. When you're in tow with kids, might be a little bit difficult, but I know people who've done this walk with, young kids in tow, and it's still quite beautiful, with the exception of a few dangerous parts, like blind corners like the ones I'm going around right now. But you're careful, and you watch what you're doing, and you can see probably the 8:30 ferry let's see, that can't be the 9 o'clock one. It's still around 8:30. Oh yeah, they run every 15 minutes. That's gonna be that's correct. There will be an 8:45 and an 8:45, a 9, and then a 9:30. They stop running every 15 minutes. So I probably won't make that one, but I will make the 9 o'clock one. I'm in no rush. I decided to shoot this video this morning, make a few points. So my birthday was 2 days ago. I am 49 years old, and switching to Alice in Wonderland from Wizard of Oz, these are two books that have always colored my view of life. And as I get older, I understand more and more about how they represent two views and approaches to life. We are all either Alice, mostly alone, on a whirlwind tour, meeting a lot of characters with neither a net gain or loss along the way. Life just is what it is, the experience. You meet a lot of crazy characters, and so long as you get through it unscathed, and maybe the better for it, then you're doing all right. Whereas the Wizard of Oz, you kill witches. Man, you should read these books. There's a lot more killing in the books than there is in the movie, and it's, I think, quite a surprise sometimes when people are like, oh, well, let's read the Wizard of Oz book, and the Tin Woodman starts snapping. Well, I won't spoil it if any of you are actually interested. So the Alice in Wonderland more or less represents the British or the UK, or you might even say the Celtic view of the world. And then the Wizard of Oz represents the American, the pioneer, the cowboy approach to the world. And it has much clearer beginnings, middles, and ends. Characters have more clear character development and story arcs. And you gain and make critical use of friends along the way. You couldn't do it without your friends in The Wizard of Oz, whereas in Alice in Wonderland, who's your friend? The Cheshire Cat, who tells you go this way or that, or perhaps the caterpillar, who actually gives you some decent advice about how to grow big and small, eating one side or the other of the mushroom. So one of the most important lessons from Alice in Wonderland is how people break down to either being the walrus or the carpenter. And I talk about this a lot, but if you don't know it, you really ought to brush up on the Walrus and the Carpenter poem in the book, and alternatively also the movie, the Disney Alice in Wonderland movie version, which is decent. It has a different ending, maybe a different takeaway message, and maybe one that's more in favor of my view of the world, which is really, walruses are the who-you-know people. They motivate people to do things, just like the walrus motivated the oysters to leave their oyster bed and to come for that fateful walk. And leaders are walruses. Walruses can make probably bigger changes in the world in smaller periods of time. The great leaders, for better or for worse, were walruses. And then there's the carpenters, who know the doing of things. So it's who you know or it's what you know. So walrus is who you know, carpenters are what you know. And of course, when you're a carpenter, your impact on the world is generally much less large, unless you happen to be a carpenter who makes new types of tools for new carpenters of the type of Linus Torvalds, Guido van Rossum, Ken Thompson, Dennis Ritchie. So there are carpenters out there who change the world as large as walruses do. But most of us are just humble carpenters making a living, aspiring to be a master carpenter, where the deal is how much energy you put in for the product that you get out. Most average people who don't have advantages or good tutoring or achieve the critical insights in life put in a fair amount of energy for the product, value, lifestyle, reward, paycheck, whatever they get out. Those who love what they do, it's never a problem. You live hand to mouth. You put in your work, you get your reward, life ticks by, you grow old, you die, having enjoyed things along the way, especially the exercising of your craft and the mastery of that craft. If you love it, it's a great way to go. And it seems to be more or less the road I'm on. And even so, it's nice to pursue mastery, because you get to put less energy in for more product out. It's a better deal. And here I am walking to New York City, the Emerald City, the great place where the master carpenters collect to do their work. And so, you know, in some humble way, I would like to think I've achieved that. But in the world of tech, the reset button is hit on you all the time. And unlike a real carpenter who gets to master a set of tools that for the most part don't change through the course of their career, a hammer is a hammer, a saw is a saw, text editors are not text editors for the course of your career. They start out being, you know, PFE or Edit Plus and then become like text edit or Sublime, and then they become Visual Studio Code. And every time the whole system changes on you, the keyboard shortcuts and macro systems and, you know, the graphical user interface, where things are on drop-down menus. So I'm always very concerned with my tools, and I've been let down over the years by this reset button. I never thought it should be that way. I thought I should learn technology and forever improve my craft through life. And the Amiga, as people who follow me know, was my original computer that I fell in love with for a lot of reasons. It's multitasking, inter-process communication, multimedia animated graphics, all back in 1989, 1990. So now when this stuff happens, it's oftentimes, even the internet and the free and open source with the bulletin boards and stuff that existed back then, everything feels like the second or the even third go-around for me. So I feel a little bit jaded in today's world. And I feel very let down on technologies of the past that have let me down. First, the Amiga with, I guess, AREX and Amiga DOS and all the scripting technologies and stuff that went with that. And then I switched to the Microsoft platform for Safe Haven, active server page, those .asp pages that you still see out there, and the corollary to that in the non-web world, which was the Windows script host. Anything you could do for a web server to provide an answer to a web request, you could also do on a scheduled basis. So you had this duality where you were doing, and I'm going to take the long way to go around to just extend my video a bit before I step into the ferry terminal. You could schedule anything that you could put on a web server. And so I was doing things with either a .asp extension for the web or a .wsh extension, which was like how people use Node.js. Well, Node.js is a web technology, but it doesn't have to be. You can just run a .js file, drop it into a scheduler, and use JavaScript for non-web technologies. So when I was looking to re-platform myself after Microsoft, I really wanted to go to JavaScript because I saw the writing on the wall even then that you can't get away from JavaScript. It's one of the most pea in the pool of tech things out there because of the way the web browser has embraced it. All web browsers embrace it. They strive for compatibility and standards now. So JavaScript is JavaScript, and unified across platforms, a great language if you want one language to rule them all. But the language itself was terrible, and at the time I was investigating it, Node.js was not on the scene. Only things like Netscape Enterprise Server, which ran JavaScript on the server, but was already obsolete by that time, not even available anymore. And then there were some hacky things like something called Helma that used the Rhino, which is a predecessor to the Google V8 JavaScript engine, which has already been replaced, but there's essentially JavaScript engines, interpreters for JavaScript. And there was one that came before Node.js called Helma that used the Rhino engine that I looked into, and then I discounted it quickly. And then somewhere along the line, someone said, hey, what about Python? So I took up Python and fell in love with it and never looked back. So I'm about 10 years into that. And 10 years is the amount of time that Malcolm Gladwell talks about as being the amount of time in Outliers that a person requires to achieve that level of mastery, the master carpenter level in a trade, in a skill. So, yeah, let me share some of this, I guess, the scenery of where I'm at here, just to kill some time because I'm between the 8:45 and the 9 o'clock ferry. Once again, that's the city in the background. I can maybe give you a view of it. It's almost visible here. And that's one of the ferries pulling out, the one I'm just missing, but no big deal. I'll finish up the video. So Normally, in the past, after about this 10-year period, the platform would be disappearing. Python is not disappearing. In fact, I've got a whole nother realm of stuff to master called Pandas under Python. It's just one of the third-party packages that has become a big, major one that allows me to bring back to life yet another technology that disappointed me called SQL. And when you learn SQL, you think it's pee in the pool of tech, just like JavaScript. But the truth is you learn SQL for a particular database, and you learn the table structures and the nuances of a particular database installation, and you get good at that. And you get tied to a proprietary vendor, you get tied to a particular employer, or at least installation of a database, particular setup. So Pandas does away with all that. It abstracts it, it makes it cross-cutting across all problems, across, all situations and locations. And you can pull data from here, here, and here. You can do transforms on the data. You can apply sophisticated data models and processing. And it's all rows and columns, just like you're familiar with from the world of Excel, rows and columns. It's what you're familiar with SQL, with tables, with the rows and columns. There are other dimensional data arrays, but most things you do in Pandas is what's called a data frame, which is rows and columns. So I am now currently in the process of mastering what Pandas has provided to create a unified API for selecting data out of one of these rows and columns thing. And it's called the .loc for .location and .iloc for .index location. The .loc and .iloc interfaces or APIs or methods or whatever nomenclature you want to use on it for selecting such and such rows and such columns out of an X by Y data grid. You'd think it's easy, right? Well, in the effort to be Pythonic, they have taken up a range, syntax. So to select an entire X by Y data grid, it's colon, comma, colon. So if you can imagine data grid name, which is usually often df or DataFrame, df.loc, or let's say LOC, that'll be easy because I can use numbers instead of labels. And if you want to pick up a single cell, it's the upper left cell, it's zero-based indexing, so it would be 0:0, 0:0 for row location 0, for column location 0. The intersection is that one cell. I could go on forever, but for making simple selections like cells, it's a lot of mental overhead. But in the very Pythonic way, the main API gives you everything for consistency and edge cases, which is not always perfect. So then there's shortcuts that you can use, like just for selecting a column, it's very often df for DataFrame, the square brackets of selecting an index, and then you put the name of the column you want in quotes. That would be a named label column selection thing, and then you can set the column value. In fact, it gets even easier. You don't even need to use the square brackets. You can use, say, df.column name equals foo, and bam, you splat foo all the way down that whole column of values. But of course, that conflicts with other built-in method names. It goes at odds with consistency in application interfaces, creates a bit of confusion when you share your code with developers. So the .loc and the .iloc are the interfaces that are 100% consistent and unified that Pandas is sort of pushing right now. And so I'm on another round of master carpentry learning, 10 years into Python, and there's new stuff to learn that brings back SQL into my life, or at least the power of SQL, all the database incredible goodness that you learn how to do when you're in the SQL world. That sort of goes away when you start switching jobs and being in other more heterogeneous technology situations. What version of SQL? Is it SQL? Is it an object database? Things go wacky. But so long as you know how to use Pandas, you have a tool in your toolbox that's universally applicable to most data situations. Again, it's the 80-20 rule. It's that concept that keeps coming up. I advocate the first 80% of effort that solves, or the first 20% of effort that solves 80% of the cases that you encounter. Anyway, that's my talk for this morning, and I'm going in to help a new buddy of mine sort of get up to speed on Pandas, right along with learning it better for myself, because I'm no master of it yet. So thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe.